Billionaire Robert Kiyosaki now says that 0.01 Bitcoin is enough to retire here. That's your retirement plan. And no, this is not a joke. His tweet already has over 1 million views. And he says, "I can't believe how easy it is to get rich with Bitcoin. It's so easy. Why not everyone buys and holds Bitcoin is beyond me. Even 0.01 Bitcoin will be unaffordable in 2 years and could make you very rich. So this is really crazy now. We really need to take a look at whether 0.01 Bitcoin could actually be enough to retire here. That's roughly about €1,000 that you would need to set aside right now. Now you just wait a few years and then you can retire comfortably with this money." Let's break down everything he said, why this is such a big deal, and why he might not be entirely wrong. But first, leave a like down below so that soon all of you can retire with 0.01 Bitcoin too. But it also has to be said clearly, Robert Kiyosaki doesn't just have 0.01 Bitcoin, but Robert Kiyosaki has hundreds or even thousands of Bitcoins. He owns entire gold mines. He also says that he now wants to shift his gold and move into Bitcoin because he simply sees much greater potential in Bitcoin than in gold, even though he's been a gold bug for many years. But before we go through the numbers and calculate everything, let's actually take a look at what else he had to say about this. He says here that 0.01 Bitcoin will be unaffordable in 2 years. So that would mean, in 2 years, it would have to rise so quickly. If 0.01 Bitcoin is worth €1,000 now, then in 2 years, that 0.01 Bitcoin would have to be worth maybe €100,000 or something like that. I think that might be a bit of an exaggeration. He also said that this year, the Bitcoin price could go up to 200,000 or 300,000 or something like that, but not to 1 million or anything. He says here, this whole thing is going to make you very, very rich. Sure, Bitcoin goes up and down, but that's how it is in real life too. There are only 1 or 2 million Bitcoins left to be mined, and he just says, hey, volatility is not a problem. Just like Michael Saylor says, volatility is vitality. Volatility means liveliness. Don't let the volatility scare you in any way. And he says here, the price is now going to enter the banana zone, or the banana zone. That's what a lot of people call the parabolic rise. Here, Robert Kiyosaki, billionaire, longtime gold bug, also a very well-known financial influencer with a very popular YouTube channel, definitely said the banana zone is coming. Don't be lazy, open your eyes and your mind, and listen to people. Like this YouTube channel, of course, but he also talks about Michael Saylor, Pompliano, and many others. It's really, really important that you do your own research here, that you don't just blindly repeat or parrot what others say, or idolize other people, but that you actually do your own research. So question things here as well. Question what I say, question what Kiyosaki says. We'll go through the numbers in a moment, so you can judge for yourselves whether what is being said here makes sense or not. And he says the following here, join the content from Bitcoin people who are making cool posts here, and take a look into the future of money. Please don't be an old-timer and miss out on the easiest time in history to become rich and financially independent. And that's a really, really bold statement. He says here, it has never been so easy to become rich, wealthy, and independent. And that's the thing. A lot of people are complaining, oh, the world is so messed up, everything keeps getting worse, inflation, and blah blah blah. But it's not really because the world is so bad. Maybe it's your perspective on the world that's bad. Maybe it's just the belief system you live in that's messed up. Maybe you just have the wrong perspective on things. Because if we simply switch from thinking in fiat currency to thinking in Bitcoin, suddenly everything gets cheaper. I've mentioned this example before. Back in the day, you could barely buy a week's worth of groceries with 1 Bitcoin. You could go to the supermarket and maybe just fill up a shopping cart. Way back, you could maybe just buy a single banana for 1 Bitcoin. But now, if I go to a grocery store with 1 Bitcoin, I could basically buy half the store. I need a transport company, a logistics company. I need trucks, a whole lot, just to haul away everything I could buy for that 1 Bitcoin. And that's how the world changes. That's how you go from being a victim to being a winner. That's how you go from being a bratwurst-eating, TikTok-addicted person to a self-sovereign, self-confident, self-actualized mega-Bitcoiner who has their life in their own hands, not only creating wealth for generations, but also being aware of their actions, their thoughts, their feelings, their emotions, bringing all of that into harmony. It's not just about having a lot of money set aside, but also having a lot of time, because the key is not just to be a millionaire in money or a Bitcoiner, but also a millionaire in time. Because what good is all that money if you don't have any time? And that's exactly what Bitcoin is supposed to teach us, that we shouldn't be running around in the fiat hamster wheel all the time, but instead, we should accumulate a lot of Bitcoin quickly now, just let it sit on the side, and watch it appreciate in value so much that we never have to worry about money again. Then we won't have to worry about time anymore either. Then we can use money to buy back our time, to create even more joy in life, more awareness, and yes, more self-love and love for others to bring into the world. But now, let's get to the numbers. We've talked a lot up to this point, So now let's really take a look at the numbers. Robert Kiyosaki says here that in 2 years, 0.01 Bitcoin will generate massive wealth. But as I already mentioned, in 2 years, Bitcoin probably won't generate massive wealth. But the question we really want to look at now is whether Bitcoin can actually, let's say, get you to retirement. So, whether you can comfortably retire with 0.01 Bitcoin. And there's this awesome calculator. I can also put a link for you down below. It's called When Moon, or you can just type When Moon into Google. I think that's easier, and you'll end up at the calculator. Now we can enter. Okay, how much Bitcoin do we currently have? Let's enter 0.01 Bitcoin here. That's how much we have right now. Let's just assume for now that we need $50,000 per year to live. We can always increase that a bit later. $50,000 per year. Some people might say, okay, that's not enough. But for me, for example, $50,000 is totally enough because I'm very, very frugal. But of course, there are also people who are living life in the fast lane, who have families and so on. That's not the case for me. No family or anything like that. Well, I do have a family, but no kids. So let's just go with 50,000. We'll calculate with 6% inflation. And let's assume, not the hyperbole case, but also not the completely conservative case, just the base case. On average, Bitcoin returns 30% per year. Currently, we're at about 45 to 50% per year, which is what we've seen as the compound annual growth rate over the last 5 or 6 years. So, average annual returns. And now, if we have 0.1 Bitcoin here, the question is, okay, when can we retire with that? And now let's take a look at the calculator. I'll show you the data here now. I've had it calculated already. We can see now that our current stack is 1 million Satoshis. That means, converted, it's $1,005 at the current rate, and the goal is $50,000. As we've already mentioned, under the conditions of 6% inflation and 30% growth per year. That means, in a conservative case, we would have to wait until December 25th, 2051, before we could retire with just 0.01 Bitcoin. And now we have to ask ourselves, okay, if you're older now, then that wouldn't be enough, but that's roughly 25 years. And let's say, if someone is still young now, or even if someone is 30 or so, then it's definitely okay here. Yeah, then it's definitely possible here. If someone is just 30, puts aside 0.01 Bitcoin, buys €1,000 worth of Bitcoin and sets it aside. Not in the hyper-bullish case, but just in the conservative case, it's possible to retire in 2050 with 0.01 Bitcoin. And these numbers here are also adjusted for inflation. So the €50,000 in purchasing power is inflation adjusted, with a 6% annual inflation rate. That means it's real purchasing power from today's perspective, in about 25 years. So yes, the assumption that 0.01 Bitcoin could provide for a retirement is actually not that far-fetched. And now we can go through the more bullish case here. Now let's take the 30% per year and replace it here with 50%. Let's enter that here now. Where do we have the data here? Where did we slip up here? Exactly. Now let's enter 50% per year here. There are also people who, for example, say 50%. That's the bulls. So if we use exactly the same other conditions, we would basically be able to retire on July 3rd, 2039. That means our Bitcoin stack would be enough to generate $50,000 a year for living expenses. Of course, we would always have to sell off some of our Bitcoin accordingly. At that point, your entire Bitcoin holdings would be worth €477,000. So that means that from just 0.01 Bitcoin, it would have become $477,000 here. But that's inflation adjusted. So in nominal terms, it would probably be a bit higher, right? No, let me think about it for a second. I think, no, those must be nominal numbers, not inflation adjusted, for how big the stack is. Yeah, that was a mistake in what I said. And starting from this date here, from July 3rd, 2039, you would withdraw 0.000671 Bitcoin daily from this savings plan. And that amounts to $321. And of course, exactly, because the value of Bitcoin will continue to rise, you'll never run out of Bitcoins here. And you could basically have an endless pension for the rest of your life. This model also assumes that you live forever. You could also create a model where, for example, you say, okay, in 30 years I'll be dead, and I only want the model to support me for 30 years. In that case, the Bitcoin date, the date you can retire with Bitcoin, would obviously be much sooner, or you would need even less Bitcoin. And now we can also go through the bear case. That means, in the absolute worst case scenario, let's just assume an average return of 20%. In my opinion, that's already a very, very bearish estimate. Michael Saylor also says that at some point, Bitcoin will probably settle at around 20% or so. But if we go with Michael Saylor's worst case scenario, 20% annual return, then we'd only reach our moon date, that is, our retirement age, on February 18th, 2073. So, of course, that would still be a long time, 50 years. But let's say, for example, you have a child and you just set aside, say, 0.01 Bitcoin for them. Even in the worst case, that 0.01 Bitcoin will help your child to be able to retire easily later on. That's pretty crazy, of course. I mean, I'm not really a fan of the whole concept of retirement anyway. I think you should just do something you're passionate about, something you feel called to do, something you really care about. And then you don't have to retire at some point, because the whole idea is always that you work 30 or 40 years at some random job you don't even like. And then, once I've saved up enough money, I can finally free myself from that job and don't have to work anymore. And then I can just hang out somewhere or just laze around. But I think that's a weird concept. You should just make the most out of your life right now, not waste your time with, some mediocre job or something you really don't care about, but instead do what you're truly passionate about. See how you can monetize that. By the way, if you do that, you won't have to work a single day in your life, and you won't need to retire either. That's the ultimate life hack I want to share with you now, because honestly, that's the most amazing thing. And it's also where you see the most incredible things in life come from. For example, when people achieve financial independence through Bitcoin and say, okay, now I'm not doing what I have to do anymore, but what I want to do, and then you see what happens. They create even more wealth, simply because of the positive energy they radiate, because they enjoy what they're doing, and that attracts even more positivity into their lives. And then, of course, they attract even more money, even more success, and usually that's when their career really takes off. And if you're just a mercenary, just working for someone else or something like that, then it's usually hard to generate maximum joy in life. It's also hard to generate maximum, monetary power. And yeah, maybe you also don't really see much meaning in your life, and you end up in a depression, like so many people who consider their lives meaningless if they've just been wage slaves. But hey, no hate or anything like that. It's also not a problem if you have a regular job somewhere. There are also plenty of people who are really, really happy being employees. Let me know down below what you think about it. If you don't have any Bitcoin yet and want to buy a fraction of a Bitcoin here so you can retire on time, I'll drop a link for you to 21 Bitcoin. There you can easily and securely buy Bitcoin. Just use the code BitcoinHotel to save up to 20% on fees when buying Bitcoin. Guys, I'll see you. See you then. Peace out.